think of when you hear the word fossil? Do you picture a perfectly preserved dinosaur skeleton in a museum? A neat timeline of human evolution? Or maybe a scientist on TV confidently explaining our past? We often see fossils as keys that unlock the secrets of history, giving us clear, definite answers. But what if I told you that some of the most fascinating fossils are the ones that give us no answers at all? In fact, they do the opposite. They shatter our neat little theories and leave us with more questions than we started with. Take human evolution. We're taught to imagine it as a straight line, a slow, steady march from stooped-over ape to upright modern human. But the fossil record tells a completely different story. It's not a line. It's a messy, branching bush with countless dead ends. We found remains of so many different human species that coexisted, species that were experiments in what it means to be human. Most of them didn't make it. They are evolutionary ghost stories, reminding us that survival was never guaranteed. Our own existence is the result of a long, fragile chain of lucky breaks. And some of these ancient relatives are just plain weird. Imagine finding a skeleton with a bizarre mix of traits that doesn't fit into any known category. It has the legs of one species, the skull of another, and teeth that look like they belong to a third. Scientists have found fossils just like this, and they throw our tidy classification systems into chaos. Are they a new species? A hybrid? Or just an unusual individual? We don't know. These are the outliers, the misfits of the fossil record, and they challenge our very definitions of what a species is. But perhaps the most profound questions come not from anatomy, but from behavior. We found ancient skeletons, hundreds of thousands of years old, with evidence of severe, healed injuries. A broken leg that would have left someone unable to walk for months. A crushed arm that would have been useless. Jaws with no teeth, meaning someone had to prepare soft food for them. These individuals couldn't have survived alone. Someone had to protect them, feed them, and care for them. This wasn't a civilization with hospitals and social safety nets. This was a harsh, unforgiving world. Yet these fossils whisper a powerful story. Compassion isn't a modern invention. Empathy, social support, and looking out for each other might be some of the oldest, most fundamental human traits. It makes you wonder, was our ability to care for one another the real key to our survival? And it wasn't just care, it was intelligence. We've found stone tools and evidence of controlled fire dating back far earlier than we once thought possible. This wasn't just one genius ancestor having a eureka moment. These innovations popped up in different places, among different species. It suggests that intelligence isn't a single linear progression either. It's a diverse, adaptable trait shaped by the environment. There were many ways to be smart, many ways to solve problems. Maybe the Neanderthals had a different kind of intelligence, one perfectly suited to their world, but one we can no longer fully grasp. Our modern, abstract, symbolic way of thinking might just be one flavor of intelligence among many that have existed. This brings us to one of the deepest mysteries, the inner lives of our ancestors. We've discovered ancient burial sites, some over 100,000 years old, where bodies were deliberately placed in graves, sometimes with objects or arranged in a specific way. Why? This isn't just about getting rid of a body. This suggests something more. It points to ritual, to respect for the dead, and maybe even to the beginnings of symbolic thought. Were they grieving? Did they believe in an afterlife? These fossils don't just show us bones. They give us a glimpse into the minds of beings who lived and died so long ago. They hint at a psychological depth and emotional awareness that we once thought was unique to modern humans. The story gets even more complicated when we find fossils in the wrong place at the wrong time. A human jawbone found in a cave in Israel pushes back the date of our species' migration out of Africa by tens of thousands of years. Human footprints in North America are dated to a time when we thought the continent was still covered in impassable ice sheets. Every time we think we have the timeline figured out, a new discovery comes along and forces us to redraw the entire map. It's a constant reminder that the fossil record is incredibly incomplete. What we have are just scattered fragments, a few surviving pages from a library of books that have been lost to time. We are trying to reconstruct an epic story from a handful of torn sentences, and in that story, we weren't alone. For most of human history, the planet was home to multiple human species at the same time. Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia, and likely others we haven't even discovered yet. Did they meet? Did they fight? Did they trade? We know from our DNA that our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. You, watching this video, likely carry a small percentage of their genetic legacy. So, what were those encounters like? Were they violent clashes, or moments of cooperation and curiosity? Did they see each other as other or just as a different kind of people? The fossils hint at both conflict and coexistence. We found Neanderthal skeletons with spear wounds that could have been inflicted by modern humans. But we've also found evidence of shared technologies. It was a complex world, one we are only just beginning to piece together. All of these unresolved discoveries force us to step back and ask a fundamental question. What does it even mean to be human? Is it our big brains? Our ability to walk on two legs? Our capacity for language and art? The fossils show us that many of these traits were not unique to us. Other species had large brains, made tools, and maybe even had their own forms of symbolic expression. These ancient, silent bones are rewriting our definition of humanity. They show us that the line between us and them is blurrier and more complex than we ever imagined. This is why these fossils without answers are so important. They are the engine of science. They keep us humble. They prevent us from becoming too comfortable in our knowledge. Science isn't about having all the answers. It's about the process of asking better questions. It is about embracing uncertainty and being willing to revise our most cherished beliefs in the face of new evidence. The story of our origins is not a finished book. It's a living, breathing investigation, and we are all a part of it. The uncertainty isn't a failure of science. It's the very heart of the journey. These ancient mysteries remind us that understanding our past is not just about knowing where we came from, but also about appreciating the profound and beautiful enigma of our own existence. Imagine finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. It just doesn't belong. Well, some prehistoric discoveries are just as baffling to scientists. They seem too old, too advanced, or just too strange for our neat timelines of human evolution. These artifacts and fossils force us to ask, did we get the story of our origins completely wrong? The standard story of human evolution is a tidy progression, ape-like ancestors, then early hominins making simple tools, and finally, us, Homo sapiens, with our big brains and complex cultures. But archaeology is constantly digging up evidence that messes with this story. Think of it like a puzzle where new pieces keep appearing that don't fit anywhere. Take stone tools, for example. We used to think tool-making began around 2.6 million years ago. But then, researchers in Kenya found tools that were 3.3 million years old. That's 700,000 years earlier than we thought. This completely changes the game, suggesting that the drive to create technology is far more ancient than we ever imagined. And it's not just tools. The controlled use of fire, a massive step in our development, was thought to be a more recent innovation. Yet, evidence from a cave in South Africa suggests early humans might have been using fire over 1 million years ago. Fire meant warmth, protection from predators, and cooked food, which provided more energy for growing brains. If this ability existed so early, it rewrites a huge chapter of our survival story. Perhaps most controversially, we're finding signs of symbolic behavior like art or burials much earlier than the arrival of modern humans. Engravings on a seashell in Indonesia, made by Homo erectus 500,000 years ago, challenge the idea that only Homo sapiens were capable of abstract thought. These discoveries suggest that the dawn of human consciousness may have happened not once, but many times in different species. For a long time, the story of human evolution was a story of increasing brain size. Bigger brain equals smarter human. But we now know it's not that simple. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours, if not larger, and yet they disappeared. Meanwhile, the tiny brain Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits, survived on an Indonesian island until as recently as 50,000 years ago, hunting and using tools. This tells us intelligence is more about how a brain is wired than how big it is. One of the biggest headaches for paleontologists is actually identifying species. Fossils rarely come with name tags. Instead, scientists find fragments, a jawbone here, a piece of a skull there. Many fossils show a mix of primitive and advanced features, making them incredibly hard to classify. Is it a late surviving primitive species or an early example of a more advanced one? These mosaic fossils are at the heart of many scientific debates. The truth is, evolution doesn't create neat boxes. It's a messy, gradual process. There was no single moment when one species ended and another began. Instead, there were populations with a wide range of traits, slowly changing over millennia. This gradual variation is why scientists can look at the exact same fossil and come to completely different conclusions. It's not about being stubborn. It's about the evidence being genuinely ambiguous. And our family tree is not a straight line, but a dense, branching bush. For most of human history, we were not alone. Different human species, like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus, coexisted and even interbred. Imagine a world where you might encounter beings who were human, but not quite like you. This crowded prehistoric world was far more complex than the simple march of progress image we often see. Adding to the confusion is the challenge of dating these finds. Determining the age of something that is hundreds of thousands or even millions of years old is incredibly difficult. Different dating methods can give different results, and geological shifts can move artifacts from their original layers. A dispute over a few thousand years can completely change a discovery's significance, turning a groundbreaking find into a scientific footnote. These discoveries also reshape our understanding of early human migration. We used to think humans only left Africa when they had advanced tools and a big brain. But new evidence shows that early migrations might have happened much earlier and under much tougher conditions than we assumed. Our ancestors weren't waiting for the perfect moment. They were restless explorers, pushing into new territories with whatever technology they had. Their survival wasn't just about being strong or having the best spear. It was about adaptability, cooperation, and social bonds. The patterns we see in toolmaking sites suggest that knowledge was passed down through generations. This wasn't just instinct. It was culture. Different groups had their own traditions for how to make a hand axe, just like different cultures today have their own recipes or customs. This was the beginning of sharing knowledge, the foundation of all human progress. And what about their inner lives? Did they feel love, grief, or wonder? Some discoveries hint at it. Possible burial sites, where bodies were intentionally placed, suggest a level of care and respect for the dead. While some scientists argue these could be accidental formations, others see the first glimmers of ritual and spirituality. The idea that an early human might have mourned a lost family member adds a profound emotional depth to our ancient past. But progress wasn't a straight line upward. Human history is likely full of false starts, with bursts of innovation followed by periods of stagnation or even regression. A group might invent a brilliant new tool, but if that group died out, their knowledge could be lost forever. The story of technology is not one of guaranteed advancement. It's a fragile flame that has been extinguished and relit many times. Because these discoveries are so revolutionary, they can sometimes be misused to support fringe theories. This puts scientists in a difficult position. They need to be open to new ideas that challenge the status quo, but also maintain rigorous skepticism to avoid promoting pseudoscience. The scientific debates you hear about aren't about ego. They're about evidence, uncertainty, and the careful, painstaking process of getting closer to the truth. Ultimately, these strange and ancient finds do something incredible. They challenge the idea of human exceptionalism. We tend to see ourselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the inevitable endpoint of a long journey. But the fossil record tells a different story. It shows a world of many different kinds of humans, many different evolutionary experiments. We, Homo sapiens, are not the goal of evolution. We are simply the last survivors. These controversies aren't a sign that science is failing. They're a sign that it's working. Every strange tool, every confusing fossil, forces us to question our assumptions and refine our understanding. The story of our origins is still being written, and its most exciting chapters may be the ones we have yet to discover. The uncertainty is not a weakness. It's an invitation to keep exploring the profound and complex mystery of what it means to be human. We often think of prehistory as a simple, straight line, a neat march of progress from primitive apes to modern humans. But the truth is far more mysterious and tangled. The ground beneath our feet holds secrets that defy easy explanations, pieces of a puzzle that don't quite fit the picture we've drawn. These aren't failures of science. They're invitations to wonder, to question everything we think we know about our own origins. Take stone tools, for example. For a long time, we pictured a slow, steady improvement. But what do we do with evidence of remarkably advanced stone blades that appear hundreds of thousands of years earlier than they should? These weren't just simple choppers. They were crafted with a multi-step process, requiring foresight and a deep understanding of the material. Who made them? Sometimes the fossils don't match up. We find these sophisticated tools, but the hominins living in the area are supposedly not advanced enough to have created them. It challenges our very definition of intelligence and skill. And then there's the journey. We used to believe that early humans only ventured out when the conditions were perfect. But recent discoveries show our ancestors crossing vast oceans and surviving in brutally cold environments far earlier than we ever imagined. Think about what that takes. It's not just about having the right tools. It's about imagination, the ability to picture a world you've never seen. It's about complex planning, cooperation, and an incredible psychological resilience to face the unknown. These weren't just migrations. They were leaps of faith into a dangerous, uncharted world. Perhaps one of the most profound mysteries lies in the evidence of compassion. We've found fossils of individuals who were old, had severe injuries, or debilitating diseases, yet they lived for years, sometimes decades, after their afflictions. One famous Neanderthal fossil, known as the Old Man of Shenidar, was partially blind, deaf, had a withered arm, and walked with a painful limp. He couldn't have survived alone. Someone fed him, protected him, and cared for him. This wasn't an isolated case. We find this pattern across different times and places. It suggests that empathy isn't some recent invention of civilization. It might be one of the most ancient and essential survival strategies we ever developed. Taking care of the weak and vulnerable might be what allowed our groups to thrive. Of course, we don't know how consistent this behavior was, but the glimpses we have are truly powerful. Beyond survival, we see the dawn of the mind. Our ancestors weren't just living. They were thinking, creating meaning. We find pigments like ochre ground into powder and used to paint something, their bodies, their tools, cave walls. We find objects, like shells or uniquely shaped rocks, carried hundreds of miles from their origin. Why? Were they valuable? Sacred? We find bones with repeated deliberate markings. Are these the first calendars? A way of counting? Or just idle doodling? This is the birth of symbolic thought, the ability to make one thing stand for another. It's the foundation of art, language, and religion. But these ancient symbols are silent. We can guess, we can speculate, but we can never be entirely sure what our ancestors were trying to say. And that brings us to the ultimate mystery: death. We find bodies that seem to have been intentionally buried. Sometimes they are placed in a specific position, accompanied by objects like tools or animal bones. Does this signal an awareness of mortality? Does it suggest grief, a ritual, or even a belief in an afterlife? The debate is fierce. A hole in the ground could just be a convenient way to dispose of a body. But when we see patterns, when we see care taken, we have to wonder if our ancestors were already grappling with the same profound questions about life and death that we do today. The evidence is just tantalizing enough to suggest it, but not clear enough to prove it. The prehistoric world wasn't empty either, it was crowded. For most of human history, we were not alone. Multiple human species, like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others we've yet to discover, shared the planet. What were their interactions like? Did they trade, cooperate, and learn from each other? We know from our own DNA that they interbred, but did they also fight? Did our arrival in a new land lead to their demise? The story of our coexistence is a chapter that's still being written, and it complicates the simple idea of us versus them. This intricate world was also incredibly fragile. We tend to think of technology as a one-way street, always moving forward, but prehistory shows us that's not true. Sophisticated skills like creating certain types of tools or art could be lost. A group's knowledge was held in the minds of its people. If a population dwindled due to climate change or disease, that knowledge could vanish forever. We see cultures appear, flourish with unique technologies, and then disappear, leaving behind tools that their descendants could no longer make. Progress wasn't guaranteed. Survival itself was a constant struggle against a backdrop of dramatic climate shifts, from ice ages to warming periods. Many populations, many entire branches of the human family tree simply didn't make it. They are ghosts in the fossil record, leaving us to wonder why they vanished. All these unanswered questions force us to confront a humbling reality. Humanity, as we know it, was not an inevitable endpoint of evolution. We are the last survivors of a much larger, more diverse family. Our history is not a clean, triumphant story, but a messy, Contingent one, filled with dead ends, lost chapters, and profound mysteries. These puzzles aren't a sign that science has failed. On the contrary, they are what drives us forward. They spark our curiosity and push us to dig deeper, to question our assumptions, and to appreciate the sheer luck and resilience that allowed our lineage to survive. The whispers from our deep past remind us that the story of what it means to be human is far richer, stranger, and more mysterious than we could ever imagine. We often think of the past as a quiet, distant place, a settled story written in stone. But what if it's not? What if the past is a constant, roaring presence, challenging everything we think we know about ourselves? The story of human origins isn't a straight line from ape to human, neatly printed in a textbook. It's a messy, tangled, and utterly fascinating saga, and every new discovery rips up the old pages. For a long time, we pictured evolution as a simple ladder, with us, Homo sapiens, standing proudly at the top. The reality is much more like a sprawling, chaotic family tree with many branches that led nowhere. We weren't alone. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, the tiny hobbits of Flores, these weren't just stepping stones to us. They were our contemporaries, different kinds of humans coexisting and sometimes interacting on this planet. Our survival was never guaranteed. We are not the inevitable peak of evolution, but the lucky survivors of a brutal game of chance. We also tend to believe that intelligence and complex culture are recent inventions. But the past whispers a different story. In caves and ancient riverbeds, we find evidence of surprisingly early sophistication. Tools that were expertly crafted, then vanish from the archaeological record for thousands of years, only to reappear later. This tells us something profound. Progress wasn't a one-way street. Knowledge was fragile. Skills could be gained and then completely lost, like a forgotten language. It's a humbling reminder that what we build can just as easily fall apart. But amidst this fragility, we find something truly beautiful: the dawn of compassion. Imagine finding a fossil of an early human who lived for years with a crippling injury, a withered arm, a crushed leg. They couldn't hunt or defend themselves, yet they survived. How? Because others cared for them. They shared their food, protected them from predators. These healed bones are the earliest evidence of empathy, of social care. Long before we built cities or wrote laws, we took care of each other. Compassion isn't a modern luxury. It might just be our oldest and most powerful survival strategy. And our ancestors were not timid creatures, clinging to familiar lands. They were explorers, driven by a restless spirit. The evidence of human migration is staggering. People reached the frozen Arctic, crossed vast oceans to settle in Australia, and navigated treacherous deserts far earlier than we once thought possible. This wasn't just a search for food. It required imagination to envision a world beyond the horizon, meticulous planning to prepare for the journey, and immense courage to step into the unknown. These ancient footprints tell a story of psychological traits we still recognize today: curiosity, risk-taking, and the unshakable hope for a better life. Even more fascinating is what these ancient minds were thinking. Long before the first written words, humans were communicating in symbols. We find lumps of ochre, a red pigment, used for body paint or cave art. We find shells with deliberate holes drilled in them, likely worn as jewelry. We find rocks etched with geometric patterns that have no practical function. These aren't just doodles. They are the first glimmers of abstract thought, of an inner world rich with meaning, identity, and spirituality. They tell us that the desire to create beauty, to express ourselves, and to ask why is as ancient as humanity itself. The human mind didn't suddenly wake up a few thousand years ago. Its depths are far older than we can imagine. Perhaps nothing speaks to this inner world more than how our ancestors treated their dead. When we find bodies intentionally buried, sometimes in a specific position, sometimes with objects like tools or flowers, it's a powerful message from the past. It suggests an awareness of mortality, a sense of loss, and a belief that a person's memory mattered. This wasn't just about disposing of a body. It was an act of remembrance, a way of grappling with the profound mystery of life and death. Grief, it seems, is an ancient human emotion. But the story isn't all compassion and creativity. The past also reveals a darker side. We find skeletons with spear points embedded in them, skulls crushed by clubs. These silent witnesses tell a story of conflict, of violence, of struggles for resources and territory. Cooperation was key to our survival, but so was our capacity for aggression. Humanity has always been a paradox. We are capable of incredible kindness and shocking cruelty, of selfless unity and brutal division. These contradictions aren't a modern problem. They are woven into the very fabric of who we are, a legacy of our long, complicated journey. As we dig deeper, one thing becomes clear. We must embrace uncertainty. Every fossil, every artifact raises more questions than it answers. The past resists easy explanations. It was a world in constant flux, shaped by dramatic climate change that repeatedly pushed human populations to the brink of extinction and opened up new opportunities. In this unpredictable world, adaptability was everything. Intelligence mattered, but so did cooperation and a huge dose of sheer luck. Our minds were forged in this crucible of instability, developing psychological tools to cope with a world we couldn't control, tools like storytelling, which helped us build shared meaning and navigate chaos together. So why does this deep past matter so much? Because it's not really in the past. It lives on within us. Our biology, our fears of the dark, our instinct to form groups, our dreams for the future all are echoes of that ancient struggle for survival. Understanding where we come from requires humility. It requires us to let go of our simple, self-congratulatory stories and embrace the messy, complex, and often contradictory truth. The past refuses to be silent because its story is not over. We are still living it, still writing the next chapter. And by listening to its whispers, we might just learn something vital about who we are and where we are going. When we gaze upon the fossilized remains of our ancient ancestors, what are we really seeing? We see bone, stone, and the silent echoes of survival. But the deepest, most fascinating questions about our past aren't found in the fossils themselves. They're buried in the spaces between them. These bones tell us our ancestors could walk, hunt, and endure. But they can't tell us what they felt as they looked up at the stars, what they dreamed of, or what choices they made that defined their lives. The real story of humanity isn't just about physical strength. It's about the invisible forces that shaped us: cooperation, compassion, and our incredible adaptability. Fossil patterns reveal something profound. Early humans weren't lone wolves. They lived in groups, and the evidence suggests that social bonds were a critical ingredient for evolutionary success. Take, for example, a fossil with a healed, once debilitating injury. That person couldn't have survived alone. Their recovery points to long-term care, to others in their group providing food, protection, and support. This isn't just a touching detail. It's a revolutionary idea. Compassion wasn't some luxury that came later. It may have been a powerful evolutionary strategy, a tool as vital as any sharpened stone. Our ability to care for one another might be one of the oldest and most successful human traits. But this early human world was also fragile. Our intelligence, our ability to create complex tools, wasn't a constant upward march. The archaeological record shows that incredible technologies could emerge, flourish for a time, and then vanish, only to be reinvented thousands of years later. This suggests that knowledge was a delicate thing, dependent on social continuity. If a community was wiped out or a crucial generation failed to pass on its skills, entire libraries of knowledge could be lost to time. It is a humbling reminder that even our most brilliant innovations depend on the strength of our social fabric. Why did our ancestors move? We often picture migration as a desperate flight from danger or hunger. But the evidence suggests something more. It speaks to a psychological drive, curiosity, imagination, and a willingness to take risks. To cross vast, harsh landscapes from icy tundras to arid deserts required more than just physical endurance. It demanded sophisticated planning, trust in one another, and the ability to make collective decisions in the face of uncertainty. These journeys weren't just about finding new resources. They were feats of the human spirit, driven by the same desire to see what's over the next horizon that sends us to the moon today. As we dig deeper, we find more than just bones and tools. We find symbols. We find shells with deliberate holes drilled in them, stones etched with geometric patterns, and traces of pigment used for decoration. These aren't just random marks. They are the earliest whispers of meaning-making. Our ancestors weren't just reacting to their environment. They were interpreting it, giving it significance, and building a shared reality. They were creating a world of symbols and stories, a crucial step toward the complex cultures we have today. This ability to create and share meaning is what truly separates us from every other species on Earth. And then there are the burials. The act of deliberately burying the dead hints at something profound: an awareness of mortality, the pain of loss, and a deep emotional attachment. A simple grave might be the first evidence of grief, a sign that the bonds between individuals were so strong that their absence left a hole in the community. Grief and attachment may have strengthened social ties, reinforcing the need for cooperation. But they also introduced a new kind of vulnerability, the emotional pain of losing those we love. This double-edged sword of love and loss has been part of the human experience from its very beginning. Of course, the story isn't all cooperation and compassion. The fossil record also bears the scars of conflict. Evidence of violent skulls with blunt force trauma. Spear points embedded in bone shows that early humans were capable of turning on each other. Aggression and cooperation weren't mutually exclusive. They coexisted as survival strategies. Just like us, our ancestors navigated a complex social world, balancing the need to belong with the drive to compete. They were, in a word, human. They contained the same multitudes, the same capacity for both incredible kindness and terrible violence that we see in our own world today. Throughout this long saga, one constant challenge reappears again and again: climate change. The world our ancestors inhabited was not stable. It lurched between ice ages and warming periods, forcing them to adapt or perish. These immense environmental pressures favored more than just physical toughness or raw intelligence. They favored psychological flexibility, the ability to innovate, to abandon old ways, and to embrace new solutions. Resilience wasn't about being unchanging. It was about the capacity to change. This adaptability, this mental agility, is perhaps our greatest inheritance. But we must be humble. So much of prehistory will forever remain unknowable. The fossil record is frustratingly incomplete. For every skeleton we find, millions more were lost to time. This means that every story we tell about the past is provisional, a best guess based on limited evidence. The narratives we create are subject to constant revision as new discoveries come to light. And that's the beauty of it. Prehistoric research isn't about finding final answers. It's about the relentless pursuit of better questions. It's a discipline driven by inquiry, not certainty. In the end, the past is a mirror. When we look into the deep time of human origins, we see reflections of ourselves. We see our capacity for love and our potential for conflict. We see our curiosity, our creativity, and our enduring resilience. Human history was never predetermined by biology. It was, and still is, shaped by our choices, the choice to cooperate, to care, to explore, and to create meaning. The great, unanswered questions about our ancestors are the very same questions that define our lives today. Who are we? What do we value? How do we face an uncertain future? Living with that uncertainty, that vast expanse of the unknown, has always been the defining condition of being human. If these questions ignite your curiosity as much as they do mine, please consider becoming part of this exploration. Hitting the like button helps this video reach more curious minds. And if you subscribe, you'll join a community dedicated to digging deeper into the mysteries of our shared human story. Every subscription is like a new discovery, helping us piece together the grand puzzle of our past. Thank you for watching.